That's crazy. Hear myself in my own ears.
No, it's good. These are freaking good, huh?
Bro, this sounds like I'm listening straight into my own brain. It's unreal.
All right, Zaki. Welcome.
What's up, dude?
Yeah, man.
Thank
Welcome
you.
to our podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So I always kind of like to start with a couple of questions, a little bit about your background and things like that. So if you could tell me kind of, how you got here, where you started, all that good stuff. And I want to hear that great story. Right. So yeah, go ahead.
Probably be a pretty long story, so I'm going to try to keep it as succinct as possible. But my name is Dr. Zaki Afzal. I now run Optimized Physical Therapy and Performance, but I was actually born in Pakistan. And from there, we moved down to the U.S. in Brooklyn for a little while. We stayed there for a couple years, and then we ended up moving to Canada. With the whole family. So it's my mom and dad, I got a brother and then two sisters, and we moved down to Canada, and that's where I was basically my formative years were in Canada, in Ontario. So we grew up there, and through that whole time, towards the end of that whole time, my dad was working in the U.S. the entire time because we lived in a border city called Windsor, Ontario, and that was right across the border from Detroit. And my dad is a mechanical engineer, so he worked for a lot of the big automotive companies. And Windsor is a city of 200,000 people, so there wasn't a ton of opportunity for as many jobs as there are in Detroit. So he ended up having to cross the border every single day. Sometimes it's an hour and a half wait each way back and forth. And he did that for 5, 6, 7 years. And the whole time we were trying to get permanent resident status in the U.S. so we could move there. He knew like all of us wanted to go into the medical field, me, my brother, and my two sisters. And he knew the opportunity in the U.S. was just so much greater, just for the sheer volume of opportunities that you have here compared to Canada. And this is interesting. It was right after, that time after 9/11, where for a certain period of time, people looked at Muslim people like us and thought we're all part of that group that did that, And so our ability to get permanent resident status was delayed for 6, 7 years. Like he applied for it, I think in like 2002, and we didn't get it till 2008. So it was 6 years it took for us to get the permanent resident status because of that. I think it was because of that. I can't be obviously 100% sure. And then when we ended up getting it, we ended up moving to Michigan, to Troy, Michigan. That's where I went to college at Wayne State University in Detroit. Throughout college, we weren't really forced. Me and my siblings weren't really forced towards the medical professions, but our dad always instilled in us, in my mom, that there's always going to be jobs in that direction, right? If you go into the medicine. So we ended up all going in the medical profession, and I went to physical therapy school actually in Henderson, at Truro University. Graduated in 2015 from there, and then moved back to the Midwest for some extra training stuff. And then the whole goal being that whole time to move back here and start up a practice. So 2019, started up Optimized Physical Therapy and Performance. And since then, we've been slowly growing and providing a service that I feel like was very necessary and kind of missing in the Las Vegas Valley. So that's what we're doing now.
Yeah. It's an interesting story you talked about in the early 2000s, being Muslim and people looking at you kind of with like some side eye or looking at you a little different. Did you experience a little of that? How old were you when that was?
So I was born in 90. So in 2001, I was 11 years old. And okay. It was crazy because I was still living in Canada. I was in 6th grade in Canada. So I remember people talking about it. We were at recess and we were playing freeze tag, and I was frozen. And then people came out, hey, did you hear what's going on? And back then it wasn't like, TVs in every hallway where you could just catch what's going on. Didn't really hear too much about it until I got home, and they kept replaying the videos of the plane flying into towers and things like that. And it was crazy because in Canada, while I lived there wasn't a whole lot of discrimination. There wasn't a ton. Of course, people were talking about, who was behind it, what was their personality like, what traits did they have? And when something like that happens, whatever traits that person has, people tend to paint all those people with those traits, whether it's their religion, their race, whatever it is, with the same brush. And then when we moved, I didn't really experience it too much until we moved to the U.S., where some incidents of, where people would say some things that were pretty inappropriate. And then there's some incidences of like, every time we cross a border, we're randomly selected, and when you look left and right, everyone just looks like us, so it was an interesting time for sure. I was actually growing a beard in college and decided to take it off because I was just like, it's just causing me too much trouble. With how many people are stereotyping me because of it. And then also because, when we go to fly somewhere, I'm always have to go to the airport an hour early, it's just a big inconvenience. So dealt with a couple things like that. Even like, when I was, like a student in physical therapy school, this is going all the way to like, 2012 when I was doing internships, patients would say certain things too. Like I always remember this one guy. I did an internship at a brain injury, spinal cord injury center, and he didn't have a brain injury, so he doesn't really have an excuse. But he had a spinal cord injury, and I was leaving one day. I had my lunchbox. He's like, "Hey, what is that? Do you have a bomb in your lunchbox?" I was like, first of all, it's not even a good joke. Yeah. Like it wasn't even set up anyway. Delivery was terrible. But I was like, okay. So I just walked out, and then I always like vividly remember my clinical instructor who kind of oversees an internship. I went in the next day and she was just like bawling, crying. She's like, "I'm so sorry you have to deal with that." I'm like, "No, it's all good." Like it's something I've dealt with, and I don't think I think coming to this like coming from Pakistan, coming from a place where, you don't really have a ton, you develop some pretty thick skin. So it was just one of those things like, why focus on things I can't control? And I was always kind of had that mindset.
Yeah, that's a great outlook. Yeah. Do you remember growing up in Pakistan? Do you remember living there? Or were you too young?
I was a little too young. So we moved out of there when I was like 1 or 2 years old. Okay. But we visited multiple times growing up. So I know when we would visit, it wasn't like, oh, let's go for a week. We'd go for two months at a time. Like we went probably 3 summers through elementary school and through high school. Yeah. And it was such a, like at the time I was like, this is so boring. Like, what are we doing here? Like I just want to be able to like, poop in a normal toilet. I don't want to squat down on the ground. But then, looking back at it now, I'm thinking it was great trips to give us perspective on what we do have here compared to what other people are living like in different countries. Because my dad was from a tiny village. And when I say village, it still now does not have paved roads. Still now has open sewage systems on the side of the road where you see a bunch of junk and stuff flowing down the side of the road. So it was one of those things that I'm grateful for now, but at the time, when you're trying to sleep and there's no air conditioning and it's humid and 110 degrees outside and you're sticking to your sheets on this little like bed that's not even a mattress, it's just like a couple woven like fibers together. You're like, what am I doing here? But looking back at it now, I'm very grateful for those experiences.
Yeah, yeah. And you spoke about your father a little bit, and this is always a tough question, especially when you get older and you kind of look back and think about your parents. But how has your father been an influence or an inspiration in your life?
Yeah, so this is, I would say, by far the biggest influence and inspiration I've had in my entire career, my schooling career, my academics, like in business. My biggest inspiration by far. I've never seen somebody work. Personally, I've never seen somebody work so hard to give their family the life that they never had. When we look at, storybooks or movies about this, like you can probably make a whole movie about what my dad had to go through to give not only my mom, but also 4 kids that weren't very spaced apart. Like my sister was born in 1988, brother in 1989, I'm born in 90, and then my sister was born in 1993. So they had 4 kids in the span of 5 years. And it was just one of those things, like the sacrifices he had to make to provide us provide us not only insight, but knowledge and guidance in the direction we had to go while working and supporting us financially, because my mom was a stay-at-home mom. I still look back and I think, how did he do that? Because I have one beautiful little son and an awesome wife, and I have a hard time corralling this kid running around, and he did it with 4 kids in not very good living conditions when he moved to Brooklyn, or even when he lived in Pakistan, and not very good financial conditions. So when we first moved from Pakistan to the U.S. to Brooklyn, he was doing his master's in engineering at the same time working full time as a cab driver in Brooklyn in the 90s, which was very, very dangerous at that time. And we didn't even know the things he went through till he told us afterwards, because he didn't want to scare us. He felt like he had to put all that burden on his shoulders. So like when I look back at it, like if I could become, 10% of the man my dad is, like I would think my life is pretty successful.
Wow, that's great, man. Yeah.
Like I always joke and say, somebody will ask me, what is my goal? What do I see like my legacy? And I joke, it would be awesome if my kids, my grandkids had a painting of me over the mantle of their fireplace. Like your dad is that guy.
100%. Yeah. And if it was possible, if my wife would let that happen, I would 100% do that. He's just like, I feel like the only reason I am like, even mildly successful is because of the traits that he instilled in me as not only like a businessman, but as a human being. He's a man of principle for sure. Not so much on like, you have to do this, but the way he taught us wasn't with like an iron fist. Like, don't get me wrong, we're Pakistani, and Pakistani people growing up around the time I grew up, there was physicality in your upbringing, right? But it was never out of like pure anger, but more out of like, this is a teaching moment type thing, And I mean, God bless my mom too, because she went through it all. Like, she, having kids 3 years in a row and another one 3 years later, and she's at home with all of us, and we were not easy kids. We were insane, right? There wasn't a lot to keep us busy, right? We didn't have like TV in the home. We didn't have phones like we do now to kind of distract us. So she's just like with us all the time. And now, looking at what they did, and now all four of us got our doctorates, right? My older sister's a dentist. My older brother is just graduating his internal medicine residency in North Carolina in June. And then my little sister, she's doing her OBGYN residency in Detroit. So now my mom gets to go to these, Pakistani parties and be like, you know what? All my four kids are doctors, and it's funny because like that's such like it's such a stereotype in the Pakistani community that like, you go to parties and all these like, the ladies sit on this side, the men sit on this side, and they're just like, men are just chilling, hanging back, and the women are comparing like, who's got the nicest bag, or what car did they pull up in? Oh, what do their kids do type thing. And it's just, I don't know if that's why, one of the things that makes, stereotypically Pakistani people a little more successful in the country, like if you see them, they're either going to be like an engineer or they're going to be a physician. Yeah. I don't think anybody can talk to like anybody like around 30 years old can go through the back. But I don't think I've ever seen a Pakistani doctor. You probably have seen one at some point, it's just one of those things that there is a big weight in the society with status symbols. And I personally have things like I don't like about that, but at the same time, I can see how it can drive you to and motivate you to become stereotypically successful, Yeah.
Growing up, did everyone in your family, like you kind of spoke a little bit about being a cultural thing, but is that something that your sisters and you knew you wanted to go into medicine or in that direction? Or for you personally, what compelled you to want to go into physical therapy? Yeah.
So for me, I wanted to be a basketball player. I wanted to be an NBA, first Pakistani NBA player.
That a boy.
And then realize I was 15 years old, and then 16 came, I didn't grow another inch. 17 came, didn't grow another inch. I'm like, damn it, I probably don't have too much of a shot here, So basketball was one of my first ever loves that I developed. On this side of the ocean, and it was one of those things that the medicine was always something that was spoken about in our household, right? Because at the end of the day, remember we were talking about like the statuses that professions kind of put on people. Yeah. I don't think like when you see doctor before your name, I think there just is like there is a feeling and an aura that kind of comes with it, and that's what was kind of portrayed in our household, and we were kind of guided towards medicine by, like I said, we watched our dad get laid off multiple times in the auto industry, right? He was working through that whole recession we had in 2008, where multiple times got laid off. And, that made him realize I need to push these, guide these kids in a different direction, and maybe, have them avoid these hardships that we had to go through. Because, having 4 kids at that point that were, around like just graduating, in high school or just graduating high school, and still living at home, because that's another cultural thing that we have, is that we don't really go away to college too much. Like when I moved out of the house in 2012 to go to physical therapy school, I was the first one to leave the house. and my sister had already graduated. She graduated? No, she was just about to graduate dental school. My brother was still in college. My sister was still in college, but we didn't move out. I was the first person to leave. So that kind of was instilled in us early on that, medicine always has jobs and always has, places for you to be and not end up, laid off. And then how I got towards physical therapy was I always thought I was going to be like an MD or a DO, and then I realized I don't really like studying too much. I don't like sitting behind a book for hours and hours and hours at a time. And anytime I talked to my friends that were already in med school, that's all they were doing. They really had no life. And then I had an opportunity to shadow a physician, and he was running patient room this way, patient room that way, 5 minutes, 3 minutes here. Every patient was pissed off because he's, perpetually 45 minutes late to every appointment. I feel like what a lot of current medical offices are is just 5 different waiting rooms until you finally get to see somebody, right? You go up to the waiting room, to another waiting room, then another waiting room, which is they call it a patient room, but it's basically another waiting room. And there was never any real personal connections built between the patient and the physician. They just didn't have the time. And the patient running late really it wasn't his fault that I saw. It's not like now when I go to physician offices and they're late, I don't sit back like, oh, he's just probably sitting back there smoking a cigar, hanging out. It's because, they allot, the system in the clinic allots 5 minutes for this patient to have their time with the physician. And if this patient has more questions, the physician can't be like, nope, time's done, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
They still have to talk to this patient. And that's the oath that they took when they graduated medical school or even started medical school. So now when I look back at that time, I think that was one of the biggest things that shifted me towards a different profession. I still wanted to be in medicine, and being somebody that grew up playing a lot of sports, I wanted to do something a little more physical. So I started shadowing a physical therapist in Detroit and saw that they got to build a lot of cool connections with their patients, and they got to learn about them. They got to look at their movements and study those a little bit more. So as I got more and more into the idea of working out in college, that just kind of keep pushing me towards that. So I get to work with the people I want. I get to be in, athletics eventually. And then 3, I get to put a doctor beside my name. So then my parents are happy.
Yeah.
So it's, there's a lot of different influences, but I feel
boxes.
like, yeah, exactly. Check all those boxes. And those were kind of the main ones.
Yeah. Can you speak a little bit about on your specific after you went to college, graduated, went to physical therapy school,
Mm-hmm.
and you graduated. At that point, kind of what were the steps that you took? You don't have to be too detailed, but the steps you took to get to kind of where you are now, starting your own business. How did that unfold?
Okay. So after I graduated, I knew. So my last rotation, I felt like I was doing pretty well. I was treating patients pretty well, but then I realized, physical therapy school, and it's not for, like, I'm not saying this is a knock on physical therapy schools, but they really train you just not to kill anybody. Really, just to be safe. That's the only thing they really train you on, and how to pass the board exam. That's what they're judged on. So they're teaching you to be a safe practitioner and someone that could pass a board exam. They're not really teaching you to be the most effective practitioner because they only have a certain amount of time. They have curriculums they got to kind of abide to, and they have a test you need to pass. So what I realized, I left, and there was this kind of like a feeling in my gut where, I would see a patient like towards the end of my last internship, and I'd be like, I'm pretty confident I'm helping this person, but I don't feel like this is the best place for them. I feel like you can go across the street to a different physical therapy clinic for someone that's been working for 10 years and they could probably help you better. So I felt like an imposter. And that feeling was for the next 4 years was like my driving internal motivation to improve as a practitioner. And so right after physical therapy school, I moved back to Michigan to do a residency program. So like in the medical model, you have residencies and fellowships, which are basically, advanced training programs, but they're optional in physical therapy. They're not mandatory like they are in medicine. So only really a select amount of people do it because you get paid a lot less and you put yourself through the rigors of basically through school again. And a lot of people are just so done with school at that point that they just want to move on. So I moved back to Michigan and did an orthopedic residency at University of Michigan. And then I committed the ultimate sin and went to their rival, Ohio State, right after. So this is another thing. If you go to Columbus, you can't say the word Michigan. you could say Detroit, you could say Troy, you could say all these cities in Michigan. You can't say the word Michigan because then people look at you with red in their eyes and like, get really, I should say scarlet in their eyes, and they get mad. Yeah. So I went to Ohio State University afterwards to do a fellowship program in manual therapy and kind of sports medicine. And it was funny, like the way I got in there was I had been emailing the head mentor and the director of the program for probably a year before that interview even came out because I was very interested in the program. And then when I had my interview, it went really, really well. It was awesome. And then it was just me and one other person. And the other person, who's a friend of mine now, and his name's Dan, he had just finished the residency at Ohio State. So they had in the same clinic the fellowship was at. So I kind of walked in and dealt with like a pretty bad hand there. And, I got the phone call like, hey, you know what? Like we loved you, like, but we're going with the other guy because, he is somebody we know. He is somebody that just did the residency with us. Like we know that for a fact that he's going to do very, very well. Like we have a really strong feeling about you as well. Yeah. So we love you. We want you to come work at Ohio State and then do a fellowship next year. And like a guarantee, don't have to apply again. You just kind of get right in. So, after I, wiped my tears, I was like, this is a good opportunity. So they actually ended up placing me in their, like one of the biggest sports medicine buildings in the country. And there I got to work with a ton of different athletes of all different levels, professionals, like ACL reconstructions, got to work with, the weekend warriors, like, older folks, everyone. Like it was a pretty mixed bag, but more athletic, and worked there for about a year and a half, built great friendships, great relationships with a lot of people there, and then went into the fellowship after and did that for a year. And basically what a residency and fellowship is like, there's lecture aspects to it where you're learning more advanced information, but the biggest thing is the mentorship you get from people that are in the place that you want to be. And the saying everyone says, you're a collection of the 5 people you hang around with most. That's basically the principle they use to develop a clinician and allow you to build up your skills faster. And I think by far mentorship is the best way for you to build any skill set, whether it's a better physical therapist or learning to be a better basketball player or learning to be, a better loan officer. Like mentorship, I feel like is the quickest way towards that direction. And so really heavily went into the residency and fellowship. And then like the day my fellowship finished, packed my car, moved back here, moved in with a friend and started my LLC. And then, so from then, I started the practice. It was in Proto Gym, so shout out Proto Gym. I started there, had a table underneath the mezzanine. I had to buy construction lights because it was so dark under there. So I was like, my backside was sweating because it was behind me and the really hot lights. And I worked there, and 4 or 5 months later, I'm like, hey, I'm getting too busy for this. I need another spot. So I moved to another gym that had a small room for me. And it was like my private room now. So I got to use the gym equipment and everything and sublease that space out for a little while.
That's where I met you.
That's where me and Jason started working together. And it was funny. There's, it just goes to show you that like you can really, like there's a lot of places, especially in Vegas, that have all the flash in the world. The best machines, the like $40,000 machines that are supposed to do this, supposed to do that. But if you don't have the right person delivering it and the right person building these relationships, growth won't happen as quickly, and it might not happen at all. And where I kind of went the opposite direction, I went like bootstrapped at the beginning. I bought a table, bought like a desk, I bought a stool, the same stool I use right now. My employees always like, are giving me a hard time about it because it has rips all over the side. I'm like, this is a memento to me starting this practice. I'm going to ride this stool till the wheels fall off.
Love it. Yeah.
So
you're like a battlefield medical,
right,
like a corpsman,
right? Yeah. So we bootstrapped and went from there to then we actually had a partnership with another clinic and worked in there for about a year and a half, and now we're in our own spot for about 5 months, and now we take a group of people that are studs at what they do. So that's what I want to do. I wanted to build a group of folks that are just the absolute, and my team, and I'm obviously biased when I say this, but they're the best team in the city. And I'll say in the country, because they're awesome people. They're, first of all, yeah, like I said, they're phenomenal people, and then great clinicians as well. So we built a relationship. The first hire actually hired as a physical therapist. She was in my class. Her name's Dr. Christy. She's phenomenal. So we built a stud team, and now we're slowly building all the toys, all the gizmos and gadgets and stuff that people, but only if they serve a purpose, right? We're still not going all flash because of the fact that there's a lot of things that the medical industry can say happens when you use a machine, but when the science is applied to it, what truly does happen is a lot of times very surprising. So we tend to, I do a lot of research before I purchase something like a machine. So we're now in a place where, we have 5 physical therapists. We're in a beautiful office. We have a fantastic team, and, everyone, I hope, loves working there. So that's kind of where we're at now, and that's where we're growing from.
Yeah. I know that your business is a little bit different than their sort of traditional model of physical therapy clinics. You're a cash-based business. Can you speak a little bit of why you went that direction as opposed to kind of the more traditional model?
Yeah. So I always thought I'd come and start an insurance-based clinic. And I always thought that. So right towards the end of my fellowship, I thought that. And then the last 4 months of the fellowship, I lived with my friend Matt, and he was starting his own cash-based clinic at that same time, where he subleased a space out of a weightlifting gym, and he started working with a lot of weightlifters and CrossFitters and things like that. And I saw what he was doing because I was working in the clinic with him for the first 4 months of my fellowship, and he had all these phenomenal ways to treat people. He's an awesome clinician, all these great ways to get people better. No one wanted to do it. Because we have, Larry from down the street that just wants to be able to eat Cheetos and watch TV, but his back hurts because he watches TV too much. And he's trying to have him work through breathing drills to kind of take ownership of his healthcare. And he didn't care. He was only there because the physician told him to go there. So he's like, I want to work with more motivated people that are here because they want the best and they want the best for themselves. So I was watching his whole kind of rise of him going from literally $0 a month to 5 figures a month, and he did it pretty quickly. And I think one, because he's a very skilled clinician, but also two, he lived in Ohio for a long time, so he was able to build a lot of cool relationships. And so I saw that, and I thought, you know what? Why am I going towards the insurance route? And I did some research and saw that let's split up some pros and cons between insurance and cash, right? So insurance, the pro side is usually towards well, actually it's not. So usually volume, it's towards right? Volume side, right? So you get to treat a lot of people because it's when you're in network, people can literally go on their insurance website and say, oh, who's in network with me? That would be the easiest, most seamless route, right? And patients always think that's the best way to go. Where, but then when you get there, sometimes you end up, after you get treatment, you end up with a bill in the mail because your insurance didn't cover everything. And that's a surprise, right? And then two, you end up going to a physical therapy clinic, you're there with 3 or 4 other people at the same time. Like imagine going to your tax professional and getting your taxes done. There's 5 other people right beside you getting their taxes done at the same time. Like that, to me, that just seems like such a, I don't know why it's acceptable in physical therapy, but it's not acceptable in almost any other profession, So I saw that aspect and I said, I don't want to do this. Like so far, the minimal time I spent in clinics that I was working with those many people, I got burnt out in months. I just felt like I wasn't, I was like, I was like a Formula 1 driver, but you put me in a go-kart, I need to be in a Formula 1 car, So for me to have that vehicle, I need to be able to have a clinic that allows me to unhandcuff myself and give the best care to my patient. So now we spend, 1 hour one-on-one with a patient every time. And this, it actually saves people time because the most we see people is like once a week. Right? Otherwise, a physician writes a script, go to physical therapy 3 times a week for 6 weeks. And then that's, an hour each time, not including drive time. And then, the actual time you get to spend with the physical therapist when you're there is like maybe 20 minutes throughout the week, where we get 1 day of an hour and then we build you a full plan outside of there. And we're there to answer questions in the meantime, like, hey, this hurts to want to do this press. Hey, send us a video through our app, and then we'll take a look and we'll give you some pointers even when you're not in. So we're in the patient's corner the entire time. It's not about we're only I clock out when you leave the door. It's like, no, we want to build relationships with you. So I'm here with you the entire time. So it was an uphill battle when I started. It was funny. Like, he's a good friend of mine now. His name's Mike, the owner of Pota Gym, when I first started out here. But one of the first things he said to me, and this might paint him to be kind of like a dick, but first thing he said to me, he's like, you're a commodity, right? I can just go online and learn what you do and just fix myself. I'm like, okay. And he was like, we're negotiating rent at that time. I'm like, hey, are you gonna just accept my rent and I can tree here, or are you gonna keep downplaying what I can do? And it was funny. That was our first interaction, and he wasn't coming at it from like a point of a point of like hate that put me down. He was coming at it as like point of curiosity, like, can this actually work? Like, insurance covers this, and this guy's, you know, charging cash for these services. But I think once you get to the mindset that what we provide is way different than what the insurance route kind of provides, I think that's when, you know, you can really open your mind up to, okay, I'm paying for the best. You know, so I think those are the biggest differences. So there it was a hurdle going up, because as soon as I hear someone on the phone of like a prospective patient say, "Do you take my insurance?" Like all the mentorship and stuff I did, they teach you like a sales process and stuff like that. But generally, like the first question you want to ask is like, is that the most important aspect of your care? Do you want to go where the insurance, you know, takes you? And if they say yes, like, I want to use my insurance, okay, here's a couple of clinics that take your insurance. If you need anything, just let us know. We're still here if you need any help, if they don't, you know, satisfy your requests and everything you need. But I think we're so indoctrinated in this country as like, you know, insurance is the way to go. But at the end of the day, the insurance company is basically a huge conflict of interest, because the only way insurance makes money is the premiums you pay them. They have to make more in premiums than they pay out. That's their business model, right? They collect money and pay out less money. So they're incentivized not to pay money out. So, you know, when you're on the phone, hey, you know, my provider said you hasn't paid them yet. Like, I need to know where the payment is. And like, now you're spending all this time trying to get, you know, your services paid for that you're contractually obligated to get paid for, but they make you run through all these hoops, because some people just give up and be like, oh, whatever, I'll just pay for this. And it's just one of those things that, you know, not all insurance companies are bad. I don't want to paint that light, but they're like, the problems you hear with insurance companies, they are a very real thing, and something that we just didn't think I wanted to deal with.
But like, operating your business the way that you do, you probably don't have to spend a lot of time that a normal physical therapist would fighting those battles with those insurance companies. Like, you can practition because you know it's being paid for.
Absolutely.
Versus having to like either have the expense or spend your own time fighting those battles.
Absolutely. Yeah. Whether the expense is hiring someone to do it or myself. It's just, and I know every office I've worked in, the billing department is always the most like, you know, grumpy. Yeah. Like, so I know they don't like what they're doing, because they're always fighting uphill battles. They really almost never win. You're in a job where you never win. There's always more fight. Like, oh yes, I got this paid, but there's also these 40 other patients I got to try to get payment from, you know. So you never win. So I didn't want to have a billing department in my office. I'm like, they're always sad. And
do you feel like as a practitioner now, when you're pricing your service, you have to elevate the price, because you know there's a large percentage of it that you're either not going to get paid on, or you're going to get paid at a way later date.
Yeah.
So you have to build that into your price.
Absolutely.
Whereas if you're cash up front, you know exactly what you're getting,
100%.
and you can, you know, budget better, I guess.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it gives you much better clarity on which direction we have to take the business, you know, because I know how much money is coming in. Like, it's one of those things that, you know, there are positives, right, to insurance. It opens up, it lowers the barrier of entry to people to come to work with us, but the cons outweigh it every single time, and that is one of them. Not knowing when you're going to get payment. There's a lot of clinics in town that work almost solely on liens from personal injury lawyers, and it's very lucrative because, you know, you get a crazy patient volume. You know, Vegas is one of the only cities in the country to have, like, you know, almost like 50% of the billboards you see are personal injury lawyer billboards. You know, so there's a lot of volume here. But like, you know, sometimes the case goes on for a year and a half. Sometimes sometimes they don't get paid. So like, you're taking a huge gamble and putting up all this overhead to provide these services when we're sitting there not thinking you might not even get paid for this, you know? So, it's just one of those things. Like, I prefer to get paid at the time of service, like any other business, you know. No other business works that way, where you can just give IOUs and just give whatever rate you think, you know, it should cost. It's like, no, I think I'm this valuable. Well, I know I'm this valuable. So, you know, this is the price, and this is the results I'm going to get you. And we have a money back guarantee. If we tell you we're going to do something and we don't, you get all your money back. So the only risk is, like, if we don't do our job, like, it's just you spent a little bit of time. Otherwise, you pay and you get the results you wanted. And, when you look at like, our Google reviews and things like that, I'm always very, very proud of our Google reviews because we have like 180 of 5-star reviews. And when you look at them, they're not just like, oh, they did a good job. It's like, here's where I started, here's where I am. And it's like paragraphs long of reviews of how we've helped people. And I don't think they'd be motivated to, even if they got the same result anywhere else, I don't think they'd be motivated to put that review up for a different clinic unless the relationship with that practitioner was built that way. We care enough about them, so they end up caring about us where they want to see us do better. So they'd rather put a review that people can read to be like, oh yeah, this is the place to go, rather than just, 5-star submit. Even that kind of stuff, I think I started looking more into, and I think it speaks volumes with how people perceive us as a clinic.
Yeah. What's your opinion, and what do you think about the current state of the healthcare system today?
Mm-hmm.
We've spoken about it a little bit, but can you? I feel like you've got your finger on the pulse on that. And so, what are your thoughts about the healthcare system?
So this is a long conversation, but in general, it's insurance run and pharmaceutical company run for the most part. That's where the money is. And I think we're kind of fooling ourselves if we don't think money is what runs healthcare. So when the money is all there, they're going to have big influence on how the healthcare system is run. There's a lot of practitioners out there that want to do their best to help people, but insurance handcuffs them. And really insurance only pays for things once you're already sick. Once you're already having a problem. They don't work on preventative things. They have like some programs, right? They'll pay for like a little gym membership sometimes, or like some like more progressive insurance companies do have that available. But I'll say the majority of insurance companies only pay for what's medically necessary, and they get to define what's medically necessary, not the practitioner, not the patient, but the insurance company, because they're the ones paying. So they get to define that. And, what's medically necessary for me might not be the same thing what's medically necessary for, Joe down the street. So I want to be able to play basketball. I want to be able to lift weights. I want to be able to keep myself healthy. And, I can get to a point in healthcare where I am, like say I go to a physical therapy clinic, like their insurance basically looks at it and say, hey, can you walk up and down the stairs? Can you get, in and out of a chair? Can you walk for a decent amount? Yes. Okay. You're not medically necessary anymore. Basketball is a recreational activity. Even if it's the most important thing in my life, it's a recreational activity. So we're not going to pay for services that get you back to basketball. So that's another thing that our business model allows us to do, is allows us to treat people through the full care and beyond that. Because then, once we finish getting them back to those things, now we program like full programs for them, strength conditioning programs and preventative programs, and have them come in for monthly checkups and things like that, depending on, how often they need some help. So the healthcare system is definitely built as a reactive system and not so much as a proactive system.
Yeah.
And I think a large part of that is because of insurance companies dictating how it's run, and also pharmaceutical companies, because there is a mindset in the United States that you just want a quick fix. Like, how do I get this better faster? Instead of thinking, how do I take accountability on this? What really caused my issue? And then how do I fix it? Is thinking about, what can I do to dull the pain? Like, what medication can I get on? Or what what machine can I sit in for an hour that's going to fix me? And, anything being done to you generally isn't going to give you permanent results.
Yeah. And do you think it's a big giant shift for Americans to think about the healthcare system as, because right now we have more of sick care versus healthcare and being more proactive. Do you think it's a big shift in Americans' minds to move towards a more proactive care, versus just going to the doctor when I feel sick and calling it a day?
Chris Rock, what did he say? The money's not in the cure, the money's in the treatment.
100%. So and that's the point. I think it would be a huge shift. I think it would take hundreds of years to make that shift. One, because there's so many people in the United States, and for us to change that, we need to improve the healthcare literacy in this country. I think healthcare literacy, we're one of the lowest. Actually, don't quote me on that. I'm not entirely sure, but I know it's not up to par where we need to be to make that shift. So that shift would be a huge, massive shift, because then, one, people would need to change their habits. They would need to be exercising and eating much better. I would say, in my opinion, a majority of issues that a lot of Americans have can be fixed with just exercising themselves and also eating better. But guess what the easy options are? to watch TV, to sit on your phone, and to eat fast food or eat something that's super convenient. Because nowadays, some fast food, companies are cheaper to eat than healthy food, so we've made it inaccessible for people at certain levels to even get healthy food.
Our convenience will kill us.
Exactly. And that's the thing, is like some people are in a financial situation that they can't afford better food, so that's when like I had a mindset shift, because I'm thinking, like there's so many unhealthy people in the country. Why are they there? They should be eating better. They should be exercising. But it's not really that simple. There are, mental health problems that people have that are really like physiological changes in their brain that make them like, want food more. I was listening to, I think a podcast by Lane Norton, who's a PhD in nutrition, and he brought up a study that talked about, they had a study of like 800 to 1,000 women, and of obese women over a certain BMI, and they found that 50% of them had some kind of like sexual assault trauma in the past. So when that happens, things change in the way your brain works, so you find comfort and higher dopamine responses when you eat food, right? Even normally, like the amount of dopamine increase you have in your brain when you eat a piece of chocolate compared to like even having sex, you have more dopamine increase eating a piece of chocolate. So I think we're wired for food to be a big increase. And when you have those changes because of trauma in your past, that's even a bigger response. So they're almost like becoming addicted to eating more food, and it's so yeah, that shift would have to happen at a literacy aspect, where like in school, we're teaching kids and teaching students that, hey, this is the direction we should go. Because there's so many studies showing, like, one of my favorite statistics is all-cause mortality. Like how much harder are you to kill from any cause? Doesn't matter what it is, whether it's a heart attack, whether it's a murder walking down the street. I think fitness is basically that. Fitness is you're harder to kill. Right. So like if you think about like the simplest things, they found in a new recent study that the amount of steps you take, the further you get up, the lower chance you have of dying. And that's as simple as you can put it. There's a correlation there. And they're perspective studies. So meaning that they didn't look back on a bunch of studies and look at like, what ended up happening, because that you can kind of shift the data on. They followed people. And this was like, I think a collection of like thousands of years of people's data. And they found, when you're at like, 6,000 steps versus like 15,000 steps, the chances of you dying at like those lower amount of steps is like 45% higher than someone else. Same thing with like, smoking. Like smoking, it gives you a higher all-cause mortality by about 70 to 80%, depending on what study you're looking at. So they're low-hanging fruit to change fitness, like I said, to be harder to kill from any aspect. And it's just that we aren't, I don't think, educated enough to understand that big impact it takes.
Yeah.
I think if you could figure out a way to like put that on a grade, like how hard are you to kill?
Yeah.
People would love that.
Yeah. Harder to kill index. Yeah. Like make like a HTKI, like a harder to kill index, and see, okay, what points? Yeah. Give me points. Yeah. Like, okay, I exercise. Okay. You're a little bit harder to kill. I run a mile in this time. That means you could run away from somebody for a little longer, or my cholesterol is this. Okay. My chances of having a stroke are lower. And then from there, building a harder to kill index would be crazy.
Build a whole like scorecard that people I'd be interested in paying to see how hard I would be to kill.
Yeah. I think it would take a lot of research. I don't think it would take a lot of research, because the research is kind of done already for us out there. We just had to compile it into like an algorithm to see, what gives you a higher relative score. So when you look at like the National Health Institute and they look at, risk factors for death, I think 8 of the top 10 are modifiable risk factors, meaning you have control over them. Now, I'm not saying like, oh, just do it, because, we talked about the, personal trauma that can come and it can change your brain's physiology, but you literally have control over most of these things. And I think people need to feel in control. And that's why anytime, patients come to work with us, we always it's a team that we build with them. It's not that, we say, here, this is what you're supposed to do. This is what you're supposed to do. No one does well with that. I mean, look what happened when vaccines rolled out. Vaccines for the longest time, the majority of scientific consensus was, they work really well. They've probably saved civilization multiple times when it comes to polio and like smallpox and things like that, But when they came out, guess what happened? everyone has to get a vaccine. And what did everyone do? No, something's wrong. If they're telling me I have to do it, something's wrong. And I understand, like, they rolled out a little bit quicker than normal vaccines, but that's because, our technology is so much better now, where you just literally plug in an mRNA sequence and you can get spit out like a vaccine that can work, and then you still have to go do the trials. I think it's still important, but I think that's a big reason why people had pushback on that, is because you were forced to do it. Yeah. And I don't think, and especially when it's their bodies. So if we forced exercise, I mean, the only place they really do that is like, prison, where they force you to work and do like manual labor, right? So I don't think the American public would, take kindly to that.
Yeah, one of my best friends, RJ Williams, I think you know him. He's a physical therapist. Yeah, he would talk to me about this. I don't know if he coined this term or he got it from somewhere else, but he called it psychological irritability. And he would always talk about when a patient comes in, how willing are they to want to get better? Like they come in, they're excited to get better. Like, oh, you got something wrong with your shoulder, and you tell them, like, come here, twice a week for 4 or 6 weeks, and I'll get your shoulder better. Yeah. And they're willing, like, okay, I'm going to get better. Versus someone who comes in and says, well, my doctor said that it's going to be like this forever, and I don't really want to be here. And then so how do you approach patients with a mindset like that to get them on the path to wanting to be better?
Right. That's a really good question, because that's the first step you have to take. You have to open your mind that you can actually get better. And when you break down why people get to that stage, a lot of times it's practitioner delivered. It's a healthcare practitioner looking at an X-ray and saying, "Oh, you got a shoulder of an 80-year-old," and you're like 20 years old. He's like, "Oh shit, okay, well, I guess I'm screwed. So what's the point?" And then to the physician or whoever's saying that to them, that's 5-second words that last a lifetime, that leave an imprint on this person to think they're broken forever. So, and we know statistics and research showing, like, MRIs and X-rays, they're not great at telling us, where the pain is. They're great at telling us, like, if something's seriously wrong, hey, I have a fracture, or I have a complete tear of this, or whatever that. But they're not good at telling us where the pain's coming from. So, because most of the time people go in with, like, shoulder issue, back issue, it's a pain problem or a mobility problem. It's not like, hey doc, I feel like I have no cartilage left, can you check it? They only think that now is because you've told them on the scans, right? So it comes to that conversation, how do I explain this to the person in front of me without inducing fear, but also not without withholding information? So I think taking a little more time is important. So if you do see an X-ray or MRI where something's like that, it's like you have to compare it to other people's normal MRIs. Because one of the biggest things we're trying to fight right now is like disc degeneration in the low back, right? And statistics show the older you get, the more disc degeneration you have in your low back, because even if you have no pain, this isn't healthy, no low back pain people, you have more disc degeneration. It's just you getting a little older. That's all it is. And ever since I got married, had a kid, I started spreading white hairs. And it's not like people see my white hair and say, hey, you have hair degeneration, right? Yeah. That made me feel pretty shitty, right? So why would we go say that about people's low backs, right? It's just something like, when trees get bigger, they grow another ring for as they kind of keep going. When you cut them down, you can see the rings. That's basically what degeneration is inside our body. It's going to happen regardless. It doesn't have a huge bearing on how we're going to feel. So why focus on something we can't control, So what I'm looking at here is when somebody has that like psychological irritability, we have to, one, make sure they understand we're on the same team. I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm not here to, force you to do something. And then two, one of our greatest tools for that is motivational interviewing, is a part of our subjective exam when we talk to our patient, is really finding out what they want. So it's not so much of like, okay, where's the pain? Rate it from 1 to 10. Is it sharp, dull? Like, a lot of information doesn't give us any real thing to act upon. But if I can find out what this person's motivation to even being here in the first place is, then I can really get them on our side and understand that we're here to help. So like an example from motivational interviewing, say someone comes in, for a shoulder pain. Oh, why are you here? Oh, my shoulder hurts. Well, okay, we knew that already. That doesn't give us a lot of information. So say, okay, so what does your shoulder hurt during? And then they start talking about activities like, oh, it hurts when I do like a shoulder press or bench press. So, oh, do you work out? Yeah. So, okay, how often do you work out? And then we ask questions about that and get them into that. It's like, oh, when did you start working out? Oh, 5-6 years ago. Hey, what convinced you to start working out? And from there, we start diving into like, oh, I want to be in shape because I want to play basketball. Oh, you play basketball? How long you been doing that? And then we get to find out more about them and just be curious. I think a lot of this is subjective exam from a healthcare practitioner should be from a form of from a place of caring and curiosity, because the more we can find out about this person, it's not a psychological trick to get them to trust us. It's the more I can find out about you, the more I can help you more personalized to what you want, and not what I want, not what the doctor wants that sent you here. It's what you truly want. My whole goal, like we're not fixers. Right? We can, like, the only true fixing in healthcare is like a surgeon going in and physically repairing stuff. And even that has sometimes not the greatest results, right? We're guides. So I never tell someone, I'm going to fix this problem for you, because you're not broken. You don't need to be fixed. You need a guide to tell you what the symptoms you're feeling kind of mean and how do we slowly start reversing those. So I think psychological irritability, like I said, comes from us getting on the same side, and two, really finding out this person's motivation as to, what caused their symptoms and why they want to get better.
Yeah. And is that what you think, or what is it that you think that separates you from like other physical therapists locally and maybe nationally, but can you speak to a little bit of that?
Yeah. I mean, I can talk to my achievements in the field and things like that, but I don't want to come off as braggy or anything, but like so residents and fellowships, most physical therapists don't do that. And since I've graduated, I've spent tens of thousands of dollars on continuing education classes to learn more and more. I've done my own self-studies. I would say I've studied more after school than I did during school. Like I said, I hate studying. I hate being told I got to study. So like my I hope my professors don't listen, but like my study schedule was like, I got a test tomorrow. Okay. The night before I'm going to cram this stuff. and I was a very, very good test taker. Like I had great grades especially for the amount of studying I did, but I realized I wasn't really learning anything. Like it was just like learn, dump it on the test, forget it, move on, And so I spent a lot of time and effort into building myself the skill set I need to help the people I really want to help. And then I think too is I think the motivation that I talked about that drove me towards the extra education, like the residency fellowship, like thinking that somebody is better than me out there somewhere really doesn't sit right with me. Like I still have those feelings sometimes. And like I like that feeling because I can feed off of it and I can use it as a motivational fuel. But I also know that, being a physical therapist is not what defines me, being a good husband, being a great dad, being a great friend, that really helps define me. So I think to gain that clarity of, how people want to be communicated with, I did a really cool exercise in my fellowship that my mentor had me do. It's called the funeral exercise, where basically you imagine you're at your funeral and there's 3 different groups of people. There's your coworkers, there's your family, and there's your friends. What are they saying about you at your funeral? Like, first of all, do they even show up? I know, and that made me so uncomfortable to do that, to think about your own death, to actually get to clarity. But I think the most growth comes under, uncomfortable situations. So thinking about that, and the word that kept coming up, what I wanted them to say was like selfless and always there. So I think that kind of drove me towards, looking at forms of helping people that come from more than just being a robot and like, you have shoulder pain, that you have this motion that's missing. Okay, let's do this. It's like, okay, let's build connections. So I think that's what separates me the most, is the fact that, I because everyone can say they care, but my goal is to show them that I care with other, not only the questions, the conversations we have, but the way we keep up relationships, checking in on people periodically over time. And if I see they like something, what can I do to help this person outside of physical therapy? Like if they have, say they're also a small business owner. Okay, what business owners can I put them in touch with that can help them grow their business and not just physical therapy? So, and I think the cash-based model where we're spending an hour at a time with our patients helps me do that, helps me separate myself even more. But now my whole goal is to develop our clinicians to be the same kind of high-level clinicians. So I think that's kind of the biggest thing that separates me, us at Optimize from other places. Yeah. And I'm not. The thing is this too. Like we don't have a scarcity mindset. We know like Vegas is huge and it's growing, and there's plenty of people out there that are going to need our help eventually. So I never like to look at this physical therapy clinic and say that's a bad one. This is a bad one. That's not our goal. Like if I can help people get care, even if it's not with us, by all means.
Yeah.
So a lot of the times we put out social media posts and things like that. It's not saying, oh, come and see us. It's like, hey, if this is happening, you can be helped. So our whole goal on our social media is to give people hope back and know that they can get better.
Yeah. What advice would you give someone who wants to pursue physical therapy? Is there any steps you would tell them to do, or what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So depending on what level they're kind of at, but we can, I can talk about my passion for it. I can talk about I really love what I do because I truly do. But if I didn't get paid for it, I wouldn't be doing it.
Yeah.
There's just everybody's job requires you to get paid a certain amount. And the truth of the matter in the physical therapy profession right now is that most jobs in physical therapy, when it comes to outpatient, where our clinic is, they don't pay very well, especially for the amount of tuition you have to take on. In physical therapy school. So with that in mind, one thing I would say is go to the cheapest school possible, because the school, like I said, the goal is for them to pass you in the boards. And usually most schools have a 95% pass rate in the boards. And two, the cheapest school possible is going to help you keep your costs down and not have that huge student loan burden. I have a ton of student loans still because I went to Turo and I took loans out. We weren't able to, build up a huge amount of money in our family.
Medical schools going
four
on.
medical schools going on. So no way my dad could have paid for any of this stuff,
Yeah.
And all of us, I basically went from high school straight to college, straight to physical therapy school, no breaks in between. I graduated college in April. I started physical therapy school in May. So it was no breaks, nothing like that, all gas. And then as soon as I finished physical therapy school, I started a job for 2 months, started my residency because that's what the timing ended up. And then from there, got a job for a couple months, went to go to Ohio State for more learning and the fellowship. So there's no real breaks. So what I would say to people pursuing it is, if financially, there are plenty of jobs that can pay you well in physical therapy, but most of them aren't in an outpatient clinic. They're like home health physical therapists or working in a hospital or skilled nursing facility, jobs that aren't as sexy as working with athletes like we do, But if you do want to work in our direction, then I would say you almost always have to find a business like ours that allows you to make more money as you see more people and as you market yourself more and you're more valuable. And then two, I would say, or start your own. That I even in town, when I talk to, because I'm a adjunct professor at Turo University now. So even when I talk to the students, I just did a lecture last Monday. I encourage, even if they're staying in town, start your own practice, even if it's a direct competitor for us. Because I don't see other, I see us on the same side. I don't see other healthcare clinics or other physical therapy clinics as competition, because my whole vision when I started was to elevate the level of healthcare in Las Vegas. It wasn't to be rich on a yacht in the Bahamas. It was to start something and get people bought in that this is the true the better way to go. And if I'm sitting there in a lecture and telling people not to start their business because they might be a competitor for us, that's disingenuous in my opinion. So I was telling them last week, if just make the leap, right? At the end of the day, if it doesn't work out, there's plenty of jobs for you to fall back on. But the best time to start is now. So that's what I would say. I would say keep costs low during physical therapy school. And really, if you're looking to work in outpatient, and not looking to start your own practice, you have to find one like ours, or maybe reconsider, at the end of the day, obviously passion's a big part of it, but you need to be able to make a living. And if you're taking on, $150,000 of student loan debt and you come out and your salary is $65,000, it's that doesn't really, add up too well.
Yeah. Yeah. You formed a relationship with the Las Vegas Fire Department.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Can you talk a little about how that transpired and what it is that you did there?
Yeah. So Las Vegas Fire, it's one of our biggest passions at Optimize to work with them, because they are a population in desperate need of good healthcare. They put their lives and their bodies on the line every single day to help people, not only in fires, but they do a lot of other things like medical EMT calls and things like that. So they are the most selfless, stand up group of people that I've met so far in our since I've started the business. So we wanted to find a way to help them as much as possible. So one of my first ever patients was a Las Vegas firefighter that I started when I started my business. Her name's Morgan, phenomenal girl, beast of a lifter. She's such a nice person. So she was one of my first ever patients, and I noticed that she had knee pain for a long time, and we finally got her right. And then she can, not only perform her job, but she can go and squat 300 pounds like, she was doing in the past. And I noticed that, she was talking about other people in Las Vegas, in the Las Vegas Fire Department that also needed the help. And, because they're government officials, we can go online and look at their salaries. And, I'm not here to say, that certain, they couldn't afford our services, but this is the one group I would be okay with making an exception. One, because it's a little more volume, but two, they really need the help. So we actually work out of network with their insurance company. So we haven't signed a contract with their insurance company. We can end this program at any time, but we bill out of network for their insurance company. So basically what it is, we see the patients, if they're medically necessary, we work with them. And then from there, we bill their insurance and we get money back. So we made it a lot more affordable for them to afford our services. But one, because their insurance pays a lot better than most other insurance companies. So that's a relationship we've kind of built with them. And now we're at a place where now we teach at their academy. One of the first couple lectures, we go teaching the cadets at the academy how to stay healthier, what to eat, how to recover, because they get put through hell during the academy, to make sure they're up for that job. So we help there. We work with a lot of the captains we work with the captains because they're a big voice of influence in the Las Vegas Fire, and so they can be secondary educators to the fire department on how to stay healthier. Yeah. So it's one of our big passions, just because and even Dr. Christie, one of our other physical therapists, she comes from a family of firefighters. So she's kind of taking on the program at Optimize with firefighters, but we want to start developing that with other first responders. So we're going to try in this next year with Las Vegas Metro. Mm-hmm. We're going to see if we can work something out. So I got a couple phone calls to make to see, what we can do there, but we love working with first responders. We think that they are, without them, you can't really have a functioning society, and they need to be healthy because, what I want, if my mom is in a burning building, do I want somebody with back pain, neck pain, shoulder pain to go in there and they're going to do the job, but they're going to be much better at doing it if they're feeling good. Yeah. So that's kind of why we built that relationship.
I think in a previous conversation that me and you had, it was super interesting to hear how the way that they train wasn't necessarily the best way to prevent the injuries that are most prevalent in their job. Mm-hmm. And that's something that you're focusing on. Yeah. Prevention of, you're jumping off of a fire truck as you're getting to the scene of an emergency. Yep. You're going to twist an ankle. What can you do? And could you talk a little bit about how you're trying to change maybe the methodology of training? Yeah. So we work with a lot of their PFTs as well, which are basically the people in the department that design programs, exercise programs for the firefighters. And I think we actually talked about that, even before we came up in the elevator. We're talking about plyometric training, and plyometric training is basically training that you're spending a little bit less time on the ground, and your goal is to get off the ground as quick as possible. So it can include jumping, running is a form of plyometric training. But when it comes to the forces being put on your body with plyometrics, so they're jumping off a rig when they get to a fire or get to a call, and that's 18 to 24 inches up. When you're landing from something that high, you're putting anywhere from 7 to 10 times your body weight through your body at that time. I don't care how strong you are, you're not squatting 7 to 10 times your body weight, right? So the only way we can really get that force on our body to get used to it is by plyometric training. So that will allow them to neurologically, turn on muscles faster when their job comes. Because the one other area that a lot of firefighters end up, possibly having some pain or hurting themselves is pulling hose. And I actually tried it. So that's the big things. Once we started working with them, we went out there, I put on the full gear. I held the saw that they use. That thing is heavy, dude. These guys and girls in the fire department are nothing short of amazing because of the fact that, they do the jobs that we don't want to, so they deserve to be treated like an athlete, right? Because that's what they are. And, pulling a hose, you got to basically, there's a loop at the side of the fire station, the fire engine, and there's a loop of the hose. You slip your hand through it and you pull it fast and you start running with it. Right. And then it's the first pull that people, sometimes get hurt with because their muscles, the muscles have what we call viscoelastic property, meaning that they have a putty type property, right? So they have the ability to stretch, but they sometimes require time for them to stretch. The quicker the stretch, the more strain that is put on the muscle. And if you train it, it can handle that strain very well. But
I think like, even when it comes to technique of doing something, preparedness for a movement trumps technique for a movement every day of the week. Like there's people out there, the first guy to ever deadlift 3 times his body weight, he had insane scoliosis, so like he didn't have perfect form. But like he's been deadlifting for a long, long time. He has super long arms as well, which helps. His name's Lamar Gant, and he's a monster, right? Because he's trained for these things. So like I think people need to put away. I need to look perfect during a squat. I need to look perfect during a deadlift, and just give themselves a little bit of grace to build their resiliency up. Because as long as you have, blood in your veins, you have, air in your lungs and your heart is pumping, like anything you do, your body will adapt to, as long as you give it time. You can't underestimate the time it takes and the nutrition it takes, the recovery it takes for your body to adapt. Because when they are training, it's not the training that they adapt during, it's during the rest and recovery afterwards that their body actually adapts and compensates for the level of work they put on. So I think that's the other thing we're trying to get the fire department to see, is that it's not all about, hit the gas pedal to the metal all the time. It's about giving yourself a little bit of grace and recovering, because that's when you truly make the changes that you're looking for.
Yeah. Zaki, you're located on what, Eastern and Silverado Ranch?
Maryland Parkway and Silverado Ranch.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so what are your future plans? How do you see your business and you moving into the future?
Yeah. So right now our space is like 3,600 square feet. It's like in an office building, and we have a good amount of room to do what we're doing right now. And as we keep growing, my future vision was always to have a performance center. Always to have 10, 15,000 square foot building that can not only house more practitioners, but a bigger team. We want to start involving other parts of healthcare that have evidence behind them, that shown that they can kind of work, whether it's for mental health, whether it's nutrition, whether it's, a physician doing blood work and doing more preventative work that way. And someone that's, very, very skilled at working with our kind of population, who's are active adults and athletes. We want to start growing our team like that. And I want to have a half court basketball court in our spot, right? A little bit for a selfish reason, but also because we want our people to be able to do the things they want to get back to, have a bigger turf field, have more weight. So when you come into our clinic right now, it doesn't look like a clinic, like a healthcare facility. It looks like a gym. Like everybody that the building we moved into, when they come stop by, they're like, oh, I didn't know they had a gym in here. Well, the people we work with need this equipment to be able to prepare their bodies to get back to those things. So we have the medical side of things as well. But I think as we go further and further, we're going to look less and less medical in the building and more performance driven, and more prevention kind of driven. So as we grow, we're going to start building into, working with more groups. We're going to be working, we're blessed right now enough to be able to work with a lot of professional athletes. So we want to have a place for them to do more of their things that they want to do, whether it's the training side of things, or whether it is off-season programming, stuff like that. So we want to have something for everyone, and we need a little bit more space for that. So I think look for that in probably another 2.5 years is kind of our goal, because the one thing I've learned so far is you can't really if you take on a lot of debt and you try to grow too quickly, then you're just scrambling. And then those months that you have where you're not making as much revenue as you thought you were, those months you're can't sleep, you can't even relax anymore. I would rather have the work-life balance that everyone talks about by being able to sleep at night, because I know financially I'm okay and that we're going to get there eventually. And it doesn't have to be super quickly, because I feel we've only been open 3.5 years and we've grown so quickly over that time. But when people always look at you as an overnight success. They don't look at, the things you've done for the past since I graduated.
Construction lights and the
exactly.
Gym.
They don't look at that stuff. They look at where you are now and say, how do I get there faster? And we can definitely help people get there faster with our insight, but you still got to put the work in. So that's what our future looks like. Our future is to keep building a stud team. Getting more into education is a big part as well. So we're going to start working with a lot of personal trainers and coaches in town to help build them to be better. So we want to build what we call the personal trainer 2.0, where this is someone that not only can, help you get in shape, but they can help you get over small aches and pains like shoulder pain, back, but they can help train you around it. So you don't have to enter the medical system. Because, and then, the question always comes up, isn't that cutting business from your side? I don't care. I want to work with the people that truly need us, not people that could have made an easy switch and now they're feeling better. And I think personal trainers are the front line of the healthcare system. If they can get people exercising, eating better, looking better, feeling better, then, we can focus on the people that are truly, truly need our help, people with like real injuries, instead of someone that like, we've had people come in that, have some shoulder pain. We don't fix them. We help them out in one session and they're like, oh, that was magic. But it was just like a small tweak, and without our knowledge and everything that we built up at the time, that probably would be impossible. But that's kind of what we're looking for. We're looking to still elevate the level of healthcare in Las Vegas by helping other professionals, but also, grow into a bigger spot as we keep going along.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this has been awesome, Zaki.
Thanks,
and I really appreciate you coming on. Super insightful for me, and I'm sure everyone here. So if you Jason, you have anything else you want to add, or Zaki, if you want to talk about anything else, please feel free.
It's been like an awesome journey to see Zaki grow his business. And I've been a patient for years, and it's like almost not even a thing where I go just to try to get better.
Yeah.
I've gotten so much better at everything, but it's not like I have like one alien thing where it's like, well, I don't need to see Zaki anymore. Like, I know that the growth that is possible just based on his knowledge and how he treats his clients, there's levels of like performance that at 42 I'm experiencing. So that's like really like a great testament to like what he does. I've referred countless people to him. And it's usually somebody that's seen somebody now in the physical therapy world where it's like, oh, I got this injury in my back. It's not getting any better. And I'm like, stop what you're doing. Like, I have the person.
Yeah.
And I've never had like somebody that I refer friends, family, colleagues to that have had like the experience where like immediately after the appointment, they're calling me and saying like, oh my God, that was, the craziest experience I've ever had going to see like a medical professional. Like the care that's taken and then the result that occurs right after. And so again, I really appreciate you being as good at what you do as you are, like it means a lot to be able to like provide somebody that kind of testimonial and know when you're like referring somebody, like they're not going to see anybody that's, going to be on the level that you're at.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I appreciate that so much. And that's kind of what we work so hard towards, right? Is to be that level. Like I said, that main driving force that someone's out there better than me. I hate it. And that hate for that feeling is what caused our growth in this direction. So I really appreciate those words. Just look out for us. Like anytime anybody needs any help, we're always there to help. And even if it's just finding someone else to refer them to, we love to help. And thank you for having me.
Yeah. Thanks, Zaki. Appreciate it, man.
Cool, dude. That was cool.
Thank you so much,
Yeah,
Zaki.
of course, man.
Yes,
That was really